You can go anytime you want when you're ready.
Right, perfect. So what I was going to present on tonight, this is the thing I've been working on for most of this year now, and originally wasn't meant to be working on it for most of this year, but it's one of these things that's grown arms and legs. So this is a project that I've started calling Space Tapes, and it started off with a question. I was speaking to a friend, and she had an idea for a project she wanted to do, and she said quite innocently, "Are you aware of anything that can turn a picture into music?" I thought, well, I don't know anything, but I think that's something we should be able to do. So I started having to think about how you do that. And I've done projects before which have involved MIDI. So MIDI is one of my favorite things to deal with because I am a failed musician, really. But you can turn most forms of data into music. So on the right-hand side of this, these are just the standard sort of MIDI notes. And I got to thinking about it. I thought, well, picture is just made up of lots of pixels with RGB values in it. You've got an RGB, that's three numbers. 3 numbers are like a basic chord. If you can turn those numbers into these numbers, then you've got a chord for most of these things. So I thought, well, every pixel is a chord then. But it's not quite as easy as that, because your RGB values are 0 to 255 and MIDI 0 to 127. But you can muck about with these things. You can turn one thing into the other, and you can use modulo, or you can use some form of scaling, or there's various things that you can do. The other thing I knew from having dealt with MIDI stuff in the past, there's even though it's 0 to 127, you can't really use all those notes because the low notes are too low for most of the stuff you're putting out, and the high notes are very, very shrill. So you have to do some form of scaling on that anyway. But what I figured out was, we can put some sort of restriction on that and create a range that we can work within, and that we can just turn those numbers into chords. So I tried that, and the way I've done this in the past is using a Python library called RTMIDI, which is great. It's great for generating MIDI output that you can then output to a synthesizer or to a music workstation or something like that. But the problem with it is, or not a problem, it's only designed to do one thing. It's only designed to do one channel, so you can only have one instrument. And what we were talking about for this project was really creating some songs. So I thought, well, we'll give it a go anyway. So, so you can get some pretty cool sounding, some sound chord progressions out of it, but that's about the limit. But you can also use it to trigger, because you've got MIDI notes. MIDI notes can also trigger drums. So you can do some basic drum things. And so that was pretty good. But I thought, no, we want to do a bit more than that. We want to create a song. So we need to figure out some way of using a song. So for a song, you need more than one stream. So I started thinking, well, how do we do that? And I'd heard about async IO, could do some sort of asynchronous streaming of more than one streams. But then I had a look at the documentation for async IO, and I just went, nope, it's going to take me too long and too much effort to create something like that. So they started looking at other MIDI libraries and found this thing called Pretty MIDI. And the attraction with Pretty MIDI was it doesn't stream MIDI, but what it lets you do is stack up notes so you can form a MIDI file. So you can get a number of MIDI streams for each instrument. So you can set it up so you have different instruments and create as many MIDI streams as you want. But what I thought was we'll end up using about 5 or 6. And then once you've done that, you can import that. So then I started thinking, well, how do we generate notes, and how do we generate a melody out of values? So again, you've got RGB. So what I thought is, okay, you can use one of those values, and that can be your note value, and then you have to put the same restrictions on, so it's not too high or too low. And then you need a length for the note as well. So then you've got 2 values. You can divide one by the other, and that will give you a fraction, which can be some sort of fraction of a note length. So you can either do beats per minute or something like that, and you have one note or a quarter note or a half note or something like that. And then just basically create a number for each pixel. Then you've got a note and a length, and then another note and another length, and another note and another length. And by chaining all that together, you can form it into what we'll call here a song. It's fairly abstract, obviously, because this is what we're doing here. But then once you've created that MIDI file, you can import it into something like, it's Ableton Live that I use for this. So this is just a visual sort of representation of this note. So this is like the chord thing. So that's your, RGB or whatever order of that. And then, also something similar along another thing. This is one of the melody lines. So, it's a bit more single note and a bit more spread out. So then I started thinking about, okay, so we can create songs, and I started putting this stuff through live. And what I realized was it was actually, I was going to say, so as part of that Pretty MIDI thing, the other thing that I figured out, because I was looking for examples and how people are using Pretty MIDI for examples. And then, one of the brilliant things about open source is there's always somebody that's done something cool with it and then has shared the code for how to do it. And one of the examples had somebody had turned it into sheet music and could create sheet music and also guitar tab. So, in theory, I can create this music, put it through the synthesizer and also play along with a guitar or, a piano. If I could read sheet music, I can't really read sheet music, but I can read guitar tab. I can go that far. As I said, failed musician. But yeah, so, the bonus of open source stuff is that there's always something cool that you can find out when you try to find out something else. And then I thought, right, so we need some example pictures because I didn't have the pictures that my friend was wanting to use for this thing. So I went to my favorite source of pictures on the internet. So it's Astronomy Picture of the Day, the NASA site. Fantastic free resource. You get an amazing space picture every day. You can create things, they've put up easy to use API and code examples, and it covers, it covers Python, it covers Java, it covers lots of things. So they give you all the tools you need on that NASA site that you can start pulling these images down from the internet. And you can get, we've got, my main TV runs off a Raspberry Pi. So I've got as the desktop picture on that, the Astronomy Picture of the Day, and it just updates every day. And then we get to talk about, I've got a 6-year-old, so we get to talk about whatever those space pictures are for that day. And then I realized, so I started pulling these things in, but I started realizing there's some particular objects. So nebulas are pretty good for importing into this thing to create music, because it creates, you've got that sort of transition of colors and things like that. And that tends to work quite well if you've got similar colors sort of stacked up against each other. You can get that slow sort of movement. You can get things like, kind of like a static chord with one note moving, which sometimes sounds quite nice. So I thought, well, it'd be good if I could have something that displayed the Astronomy Picture of the Day on my desktop, because I'm working from home a lot these days, as I think of most people. I thought it'd be good to have something on my desktop, so if I could see the Astronomy Picture of the Day and I'll go, oh, that's a good one today, and I can take that and then download it to the computer and start doing the processing on it. So then I thought, right, how can I do a viewer? So about the time I was doing this, the Pico W came out. And that was one of the things I thought was missing when the original Pico came out. And I hadn't really used one a lot, because my things tend to be grab something from the internet, do something with it, and output it, sort of thing. And I always thought, because it's not really, because you didn't have the internet on it, I just never really got that engaged with the Pico W. So I thought, well, that's quite a good idea. So I could use that, get one of those tiny little screens from Pimoroni or something like that, and then that will give me a little desktop display. So I created this little thing, and it just brings up the picture for the day, and it displays some of the APOD text that you get. You get things like who took the picture and things like that. I thought that's a nice little thing, and then I'll be able to see if today's picture is a good picture. But as all these things are done, I always get in trouble at work for oversimplifying things and making things sound too easy. So I thought, yeah, brilliant, I'll just download the picture, display it on the thing. But then what I realized when I was doing it was you actually need a bit of image processing to get it to fit on the screen in the first place. And the Pico just doesn't have the memory to allow you to do that sufficiently. So I thought, right, how am I going to do this to get this? So this is originally a program that's maybe about music, and now we're in image processing and how to display things on a tiny screen. So then I thought, well, I've got a Raspberry Pi Zero that's sitting in the background running jobs anyway. So I thought, right, I'll just do it on that. And then, well, but how am I going to get the picture from the Raspberry Pi Zero onto the Pico? So I started having a look into that, and then I figured out, oh, you could create a little web server. And instead of looking on the actual NASA site, I can just go onto this local web server. So I've now got a little Pi Zero with, let's do these other jobs, but it creates this daily web page. that goes in and displays the image, and then the PicoW pulls it from that. So now I've learned a little bit of basics of HTML and how to display images on a little local web server. So now I've got, every day I can go in and I can see if the picture is quite good. At this point, I've actually got really into, I've learned how to work with these MIDI files, and I was quite liking the output that's coming out now. Because I'm not really a musician, like I often get quite embarrassed by making music. Because of this, there was a little bit of distance with this because I had this algorithm creating music. So I was kind of figuring, well, it's not me making the music. So do you know what I mean? I could actually enjoy it a bit more than usually me trying to come up with a melody or something like that. And then I started saving some of the examples down because some of them are quite light. So I was like, right, I'll start saving this down. And I just created a folder on my computer called Space Tapes. And I don't know why I called it Space Tapes, but the project just became Space Tapes. So, and then I had enough of these songs that I thought, actually, this is turning into an album, like not an album that I was actually going to release, but I had enough songs that I had like 10 songs or something like that, and I thought, yeah, I could release this as an album or something like that. So I wanted, maybe not an album, but I wanted to create an object so that I could sort of, so that I had something physical from the project as well as having come up with all these files on the computer. So I started having to think about what I could create for that. And like most people, I've got these things that, you see on Pi Moroni or the Pi Hut, and you think, oh, that looks brilliant. I could you totally use that in a project. And then you get it and you code it and you do something with it, but then nothing ever really happens with it. And it goes in your parts drawer and you're kind of like, well, that wasn't quite what as excited as I thought I was going to make it. But yeah, I had a few unfinished things that I'd put aside to one use and I really wanted to use later on. So I had this little transparent OLED screen, which I was thinking I was going to create a set of smart glasses from that. But in reality, either my eyesight's too bad or the screen's not precise enough and you can't really use them as smart glasses because you can't really read the letters that are on them. And I had a little MP3 player that was meant to be for sound effects for a robot. That the robot's still in the backlog to be done. That's still going to be built at some point, but I've stolen the MP3 player now. And I had a little TFT screen with an SD card, which is about the same size as the screen on the viewer. Because what I realized on that viewer was I thought like maybe that little viewer won't show the images so well, but actually the images come up pretty well in that and they're pretty precise. And yeah, so I'd started calling this project Space Tapes. And then I thought, oh, what would be a great idea is if I could fit that all into a tape case. So I could wire all that stuff up, have a Pico running it, display some images and stuff like that. And I thought, great, that's something to do, and that'll be the object, tape case. And then I thought, oh, but wait a minute, that's a lot of wires. So there's not much space in a tape case. So how am I going to do that? And then I thought, right, I could just create a PCB. But again, oversimplified things because I've never tried creating a PCB or something like that. So again, back to the internet, get a couple of tutorials on how to create a PCB, and I created my first PCB. So I created, opened up something, downloaded KiCad, which is what a lot of people recommended for this use, and actually it's pretty easy. And it was, again, one of the tutorials, like the bonus bits of a tutorial, someone had put how to load an image, and it's like, great, so that means I could create an image of a tape and just like overlay that on the PCB, and then that can be the sort of background for the PCB. And yeah, as I was saying at the bottom, there's a small mistake on the first version. One of the connectors was better on the other side, and it meant you had to fold some of the connecting wires on the bottom. But you live and learn. So we eventually ended up with version 2 of that. So then what we've got to is the finished project, and this is I said finished project. It's not quite finished, but this is the sort of little project. So we've got a little bit of text scrolling on here. So that's the description from the NASA site of the picture. This is the picture of the day, and then on the top here there's a little 3.5mm jack, which I can use to output sound to either headphones, or I can put it through a stereo if I get like an RCA connector cable. And it kind of almost fits in a tape case. I've got to shift it along slightly a little bit to the side because the jack's just slightly too big. But yeah, so this is the object that I've ended up with. So what started out as a simple question from a friend grew hefty arms and legs and was eventually turned into a kind of album and a kind of tape object. And I thought it was quite good because I'd kind of come full circle on this, because one of the first books I read about for MicroPython was Nicholas Tollervey's book. And in it, he mentioned this other book called Enchanted Objects. And I'd always thought, oh yeah, I'd quite like to make something like those, because like my projects never ever get finished, and they always end up in like spaghetti wires, and they just end up on a desk without a case or anything. And I thought, this one, I'm going to actually make this one into a proper project. And I kind of have, and there's a kind of object, I need to finish it off, but you know, there's an actual object, an actual thing that I could say, hey, I made this. And it actually looks kind of okay-ish. So yeah, just sort of recapping what I learned from trying to just turn what a simple project should have been, of just turned some image into some music. Started using the Pico, which I'd never used before. I'm actually now totally addicted to the Pico. I think it's like a really good, especially the Pico W. I think that's a really good alternative to the Zero W, which you can't get anymore, or which we're really struggling to get. I've learned how to create MIDI files, like full MIDI files with multiple tracks. I've learned how to communicate over SPI, so both the transparent OLED screen and the TFT screen use SPI, and the SD cards that are on the back of them use SPI as well. The little MIDI player, the little MP3 player, sorry, uses UART. So I'd never used a UART connection before, or if I had, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. Whoops. I've learned how to do PCB design and production. That was actually a lot simpler than I thought it was going to be. It's quite good fun connecting those spaghetti wires up and not having to do it by soldering, so that was good. Learned how to create a web server using a Pi. So that's something I can now, you know, spin up things for some of the smart stuff in my home. So we're only, you know, looking at for that local web server. And the bit that I was meant to be doing in the first place was a bit of image manipulation with Python to get things down to a suitable size for displaying on the screen. So that's kind of it. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, you're gonna play some music for us?
I can, yeah.
Assume that we can.
I was going to say, yeah. Where's the proof in the pudding?
I don't know if you have to set it so Zoom shares your audio. How that works.
Oh. I'll see if I can do it in something. I was going to do it in that, but the Zoom controls are actually covering up the bit that I need from that. So
Don't think that's coming through. I don't know if you have to
is it
change
not?
this.
Okay, let me just see if I can do something.
Might have to change your audio settings on the Zoom. Not sure. I don't think it'll be there. Send or share screen, maybe?
Yeah, you need to. I don't know whether you need to loop the audio back in, or whether it's under when you share screen, whether you share with audio.
All right, okay, let me just stop the share for that.
Oh yeah. You click on the screen you want to share, and this share sound in the bottom left.
Sorry, but this is getting me put my password in. Let's see if we can remember that.
Scott's still there?
I think we've lost him.
Okay, I'll just give him a minute or so and see if he can get back on. There he's back. You're on mute, Scott.
Oh, yep, sorry. Yeah, it's not letting me share the audio for some reason. I'll see if I can work out the settings in the background and see if I can play some later on, maybe.
Okay. Anyone got any questions?
You should be able to unmute yourselves if you do.
How long did this project take you, Scott?
Yeah, so on and off about 6 months probably, I think. But it was kind of stop-start as well, because so like in April, I think I probably started in about February, and then in April, my wife and kid ended up getting COVID, and I ended up being isolated in my bedroom. So that gave me an impetus and time, which I don't normally have, to start working on it. So that really kicked it off. And then in June, I ended up getting COVID, but I was back in my bedroom by myself for another like 2 weeks. So I had a bit more time to work on it then. So it was one of these things that was kind of stop-start. But yeah, probably about 6 months on and off, because there was various bits on it as well.
How does it actually read the sound? Like, does it go sort of like left to right, as if you were reading the pixels like a book?
Yeah, so if you go into let me just share. Yes, if I just click on that. Yeah, so this is the start of the song, and this is the end of the song, and it just goes left to right across that. And then these are the sort of piano keys that would work as you go along. So yeah, it just basically streams up, and that pretty MIDI library just kind of stacks that up. So that'll be note 1, and that's got a certain duration, and then that's note 2. And it just sort of adds things on, or just appends things to that MIDI file until you get to put a limit on it for some of them of like 3 minutes or something like that, because everything was being like 10-12-minute songs.
So in lieu of hearing any sounds, have you got a hit on your hands yet?
No, but I've been sort of sharing them. I have a couple of plays on sort of podcasts and stuff like that. But it just got to the point where I was like, I actually quite like this stuff, and I'm not embarrassed of it, which is the first time of me ever doing music that I've recorded something. I thought, actually, that's do you know what I mean? That's different, or it's interesting, or something like that. So yeah.
Right, thank you.
And if you try different types of photos, like not just space photos, but photos of your family or whatever.
Yeah, so well, that was kind of how it started out. So it's my friend who's doing the project. Um, she's doing an exhibition. Like her mum died a few years ago, so she's doing some sort of art project for that, and it was to do some music on that. And I think the original thing we were going to do was, you know, photos of her mum or like her mum's medical records and maybe like X-rays and stuff like that. So that was the idea, because you know if you think about an X-ray, it's quite black and white, a lot of them, but then we realized that no, they're quite brown as well. So then we started experimenting with X-rays that were taken off the internet, and that works quite well as well. It's different, you know, different types of images. The NASA ones are great because you get lots of different colors and stuff, so there's a lot of variation, but something's quite interesting with a more limited picture.
Yeah, we had somebody, I think it was about 4 years ago, maybe even longer, and they had hooked up a bunch of instruments to Twitter. So taking Twitter messages and playing them, each letter. Somehow decide how to play each letter. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I think the tricky bit. So I've always been like, I can strum a guitar. Do you know what I mean? I can read chords and strum a guitar and stuff like that. But I've always been too lazy to learn music theory, because I just looked at it and just went, oh, that's too much. I can't bother to learn that. But somehow decided it wasn't too much to sit and program it all into Python and to work out what different scales were and all the different gaps and stuff like that. So I've actually learned more about, like, I've been playing guitar for about 25 years or something like that, and I've learned more about music theory in the past 6 months by programming in Python than I ever did with playing the guitar. So
What's that true nerd for you? You sort of decide to do something and then you spend way more time just trying to make things simple for yourself.
yeah. More difficult. My friend was laughing. She's like, "So how do you not know music theory, but you can sit and do this and program in?" It's like, yeah, this is enjoyable. That the other bit is not.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions for anyone?
I was just going to say, looking at the different images, how would you still put the musical output in the same genre, or actually did the different images quite very different musical pieces?
Yeah, well, you can kind of, that's the good thing about this music thing that I'm using, this Ableton Live. It's got quite a few different instruments and stuff like that. So what I was trying to do initially was try and make things sound like what I thought the picture would sound like, if that makes any sense at all. Yeah, so this one that's on at the moment, I can get that in. So that one's quite an angry looking picture. So it's got, like, the music for that one's got electric guitars and stuff on it. So, you know, I was trying to do that. But then there was one of the James Webb Space Telescope, because that's the other thing that happened while I was in the middle of this. Like, we started to get the images from the James Webb Space Telescope. And there was one beautiful image from that which I've used, which is of this area of the sky called the Carina Cliffs, which is like this beautiful, multicolored, really detailed image. And I thought, oh, I'm going to create a really happy side. Then I end up using some, it sounds quite miserable. It doesn't tie up with the image at all, but I really like the sounds that came out of it. So that was the idea. I would try and sort of sonify, or whatever you call it, the images, and try and have it so that it was an audio representation of the images. But then sometimes I put it on certain instruments, I was like, oh, that's not what I wanted, but it sounds really good, so I'm going to leave it like that.
Can I throw a question?
No, nice.
Sorry.
Go on. Sorry.
Can I throw a question to everyone? You can get Raspberry Pis with QSPI RAM up to I think it's 16 meg now, or at least 8 meg. Is that stuff usable for this sort of thing, or does it wear out? Sorry, I meant the image processing. So if you're doing image processing, presumably you're doing a vast amount of reading and writing. And I'm wondering if QSPI is a solution to that, or whether it's prone to wear or too slow, or what. Any opinions, anyone?
So in terms of the stuff I was doing for image processing, it wasn't really anything really clever or resource intensive. It was more just shrinking stuff down and, you know, creating a certain size out of it. So, you know, those tiny screens were only like 200 by 200 pixels or something like that, which I thought was going to be like really coarse images, but actually when you shrink it down, it still looks pretty good. So yeah, like as I said, I've got for what I'm doing, which isn't any sort of really intensively image processing. I'm using a Pi Zero. It's just got a little Python script that just shrinks that image down.
Okay. Thanks so much, Scott. Hopefully we can figure out the how to get the audio working so we can hear it a bit later.
Have you considered turning the music into pictures?
Going the other way.
There is there's a whole site, like what are the still, like in this day and age, I'm still on a mailing list, so an email list, which is the Synth DIY mailing list, but it's actually got quite a lot of people who were involved in the 80s with the original sort of synth boom and all that kind of stuff, and they're always up to that kind of stuff, like putting stuff through oscilloscopes and trying to get it to draw pictures and stuff like that.
Interesting. Another interesting project for six or 9 months.
Yeah, it's not another rabbit hole that I don't have time to dive into.
Projects like that, you know, some just take you deep down rabbit holes. Nice. Thanks very much. Vinny, do you want to?
Yeah, so that's the image.
Oh yeah.
Very cool, Scott. Very cool.
Yeah, so it was not saying about the sort of angrier ones. This makes it sound like I can play guitar, but that's all software.
Oh, that's brilliant. Reminds me of the everyone's been to a planetarium where they play like Pink Floyd and they got the planetarium stuff going on.
Yeah, so a lot of the fun with it was just trying to figure out what sounds nice together and try to bring some usual mixes of stuff and usual mixes of instruments.
Which Pink Floyd track do they play, Richard?
I don't remember which one it was. It's probably like 40 years ago, 30 years ago.
All right. No, I'm going to play it tomorrow and see if it corresponds to some of this.
you create a cursor on your picture so you know what parts of the picture produce which sounds?
I know, I've kind of thought about doing that. I thought about could I do that. And then, so yeah, that's probably something I could add eventually. So it's probably, I wonder if it cheats because like I've had to, some of the stuff you have to compress it down because you know the timings don't exactly work in the software, so you end up with some of the tracks are like 4.5 minutes and other ones are like 4 minutes and 5 seconds, so you just end up with a really boring bit at the end if you don't cut some of that bits off. Or cheat a wee bit and try and finish it on a good bit, so it doesn't sort of trail on for ages.
You should be very happy with what you've achieved.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
It's brilliant. I love it. You can just imagine somebody thinking it's they're sending signals to us, and this is what they're saying.
Pretty cool. Thanks for that, Scott.
Okay, yeah, so there we go.
It's good to hear that.
Excellent. Well done, Scott.
Very good. Glad we were able to actually hear that.
Yeah, I finally got it working.